Hey, Pastor Phil here again. Stoked that you're joining us. Just got a little object lesson for you again. You remember those days you ever been in a nursery and you have this object, this bigger like square or circle, and it's empty, void on the inside. And then you have these little objects, and you're a little toddler, and you're trying to get those objects inside of them, and you've got maybe a circle, and you're trying to look on the square, like where does the circle fit in, and finally it pops through, and then maybe it's a square, maybe it's a triangle. It's like, oh, if I could just get them in there, what would that look like? And so imagine, like, as a little child, toddler, it's like, oh, if I just had a circle, square, triangle, right? That was just like blow our minds. The circle, square, triangle. What if I was to tell you that it actually exists? The circle, square, triangle. And I like to use the circle, square, triangle as an illustration, as an object lesson, to find a little bit out about God and who He is and His characteristics. And in the same way that, like, a circle is unending, it's infinite, and so is our God. And there's so much about God that we can't just package and put through and understand, like, what this is, but like, what, who, and what, and a circle is just spectacular because it's like unending and it's hard to quantify. But God is like this in many ways, and there's things about God that is just hard to understand. How can He be fully just and be righteous in all things, and yet it's part of the very nature of God to be loving and yet be able to show justice and to not allow people to get away with things. So what kind of loving God would do that? But in His own way, and in a way that is only righteousness by Him and justice by Him. He knows how to do that, and that's God the Father. Oftentimes we look at God of the Old Testament and God of the New Testament. We compare those two, and yet He is the same God. I like the square here. I think of Jesus, the exact representation of God, and we get a pictorial of Jesus in the gospel accounts. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And it gives us this idea that Jesus is, He's that suffering servant. In Mark, he says, I came to serve, not to be served, and to be a ransom for many. So there's this perspective that Mark gives us. And in Matthew, we see Him as this kingdom purveyor. He's bringing the kingdom as the king, but not the type of king that most people anticipated. He comes as a humble king, providing an economy that's so upside down from this world. And Matthew displays that. Now Luke was a doctor, right? And so he shows us much of the humanness, that Jesus is a man, and how He came as a substitute for us. Love that picture. And then there's John over here, and these other three sometimes are called the Synoptic Gospels, and they're very similar in their storytelling and to get us around the picture of who Jesus was. I always likened it to, like, there's these three video cameras kind of on one side, and they're shooting and recording parts of Jesus' life for their audience. But then Mark's clear here on the other side, or maybe shoulder to shoulder with Jesus. That is John, the disciple John, and he gives this perspective of Jesus as God. So He's fully human. Luke, He's fully God, and John. Matthew shows Him as king, and Mark shows Him as servant. That's just one way. That's maybe too simple. It's much more complex than that. But that's the Father, Son, and then the Holy Spirit, and His role in our lives, and those who've trusted in Jesus to make a way for us to connect to God. We're implanted with the Holy Spirit, right? And so this is just a stencil. It's just a concept of, man, if God could just fill the void, right, in our lives, because we're empty. And you've heard the God-shaped hole, and no illustration is perfect, whether you're using solid, liquid, and gas like ice or an egg and how it's made up. But what I like about the circle, square, triangle, if it really existed, it would be all in one. Hebrews tells us that we got to believe that God exists and He rewards those who earnestly seek after Him. And Jesus said to those who believe in me that He's going to make it right with the Father. And the Spirit has come to guide us into all truth. Like what if the circle, square, triangle really did exist? What if it was this? Sometimes you look at things like that in the gospel and you're like, it's too good to be true. Is it too good to be true? Well, it really does exist. There is one object, and I know you think I'm going to try to trick you. Have you ever heard that trick before where they're just like, hey, I bet I can, do you think I can poke my head through that hole? Do you think I can like poke my head through that hole? Right? Have you ever heard this trick? And then someone falls for it and like, no, you can't do it. And then I'm just like, yeah, I can poke my head through that hole. And they're like, oh, see, a little bait and switch. You didn't really do what we thought. No, what I'm telling you, there really is a circle, square, triangle. It really exists. And oftentimes I'll just let you ponder that and process that. But since we're shooting a quick video here, I want to show you the object. It really does exist. And what I like about this is sometimes this modalism thought, which is a fancy way of saying that God quit being the Father so that He could be the Son. And He quit being the Son so that He could be the Holy Spirit in us. He had to stop being one in existence. But no, He always exists. And He's been in existence in this capacity. And so it throws away the idea of modalism, that God is the Father, the circle. Like He understands what justice is and what that means to us. He both handles like how to defend the cause of those who doesn't have someone to defend for them. So He's a righteous judge, justice, and He loves. He errs on the side of grace, it seems like, more than I do, and I love that about Him. So He is the circle. It's the same object, and He is a square. Look at that. It's right through there. Circle, square. Jesus was in all ways like the Father and represented Him. He only did that which the Father wanted Him to do, and He paid the perfect price and sacrifice for us, a substitute for us. And the good news of the gospel is that He just didn't die, but He rose on the third day to give us hope of this new life. And not just life in eternity future, like life right now, more abundant. And that is promised to us through the Holy Spirit, triangle. And see, He's still all three at one, just our limited perspective sometimes in our finite minds can only handle so much of Him, that He's the circle, square, triangle. And He didn't quit becoming one in order to become the other, right? And in the same way, it just blows our minds. We must believe that God exists and that He rewards those who earnestly seek after Him. The circle, square, triangle.